Thank you very much, Claudia. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, hello and welcome to this plenary session where we'll be gathering the perspective of multiple stakeholders on the role of public development banks to scale up and deliver inclusive and green food systems. Before we delve into the substance, I would like to remind you of your logistics. First, it will be a hybrid event. We'll have some speakers in the rooms, others will be connecting online. Translation will be available from and to Arabic and French through the bottom, at the bottom part of your screen if you're connecting online, or from the headsets that you can find outside for those who are in the room. So just to set a little bit the stage, I would like to share with you a few facts to underline the importance of this morning discussion. And this is the topic that we will be focusing on during this session. And this is very important for the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, the objectives set in the Paris Agreement, but in a more concrete way to our daily lives, our futures, and the futures of our children. Agriculture provides income to millions of people. Most of them are poor and live in rural areas. Women represent 40% of the global agricultural workforce, but these categories often struggle to make a decent living out of their activities. We also know that food systems account for roughly 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. They're a major cause for land degradation, water use, and loss of biodiversity. Last but not least, the number of people affected by hunger has been on the rise since 2014. By now we know that there will not be enough food to feed the global population unless we double production by 2050. Still, agriculture remains underdeveloped, underfunded, capturing barely 5% of global development flows and a very limited share of commercial credit. So cognizant of these issues, the Agricultural Cluster of Public Development Bank has underlined this declaration in the framework of the first edition of the Finance in Common System, their commitment to work together to scale up financing to deliver inclusive and green food systems. Since this declaration, the group has been meeting on a regular basis, and today will be an opportunity to learn more about the concrete outcomes of this work. To set the stage for today's plenary, we invited 3 leaders who will be sharing with us their vision, the opportunities, and also the challenges. I was really touched by the earlier speech about the need to work together to finance in common to change things on the ground. So without further ado, I would like to call on our first speaker, Mr. Gilbert Houngbo from the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Mr. Houngbo, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Thouraya. Good morning, colleagues. Let me start by specifically express my thanks and appreciation to CPP and IFAD, who are our critical partners in this endeavor, and also recognize, I didn't see you before, Dongyu, the Director General of FAO, and all of you. I just want to take a few minutes to briefly recap how we got here, and that this process, which was set in motion at the first summit of the Finance in Common Summit hosted by France in November last year. It was broadly recognized that climate change and COVID-19 were undermining effort to achieve the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement. It was also acknowledged that transforming food systems will be central to accelerate progress on both counts. So we, public development banks, we knew we could leverage our common expertise, our common experience to help make this happen. At the first summit, we made a joint commitment to rethink PDB's investment in food and agriculture. This commitment resonates at this auspicious moment as we follow up on the Food System Summit that were concluded about a month ago and prepare for COP26 in Glasgow in a matter of 1 or 2 weeks. The idea is to focus more on inclusive and green financing for food systems to make catalytic investment in agriculture and the food economy. IFAD has been investing in small-scale farmers and rural communities for 4 decades, and we are eager to share experiences of channeling the green financing toward these commitments. And together, I'm totally convinced that the PDBs have the capacity to provide the financial support rural enterprises and the rural small producers need to foster transformations in the food systems while improving their livelihoods and their resilience. Dear colleagues, we know the need is quite urgent and is huge. We're talking about 350 billion needed annually if we want to make it by 2030. This investment could generate, however, that's the positive side, economic gains of more than 5.7 trillion US dollar every year. And to make this happen, we need to create the conditions for PDBs to stimulate more investment from the private sector. We need to develop adapted financial products for rural producers and for micro and small, medium enterprises. We need to strengthen our operations on the ground, tracking and reporting on environmental and social impact to ensure maximum benefit to the poorest and the most marginalized. The public development banks platform seek to scale up PDBs individual investment through technical assistance, knowledge sharing, innovation, and better tools to measure impact and assess risk. The success of the platform will depend on strong and broad partnership, including partnership with governments, development and financial institutions, private companies, civil society, and farmers' organizations. So I invite you to join us as we launch this platform and to think about how to leverage this mechanism to improve impact on the lives of those most in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Houngbo, for reminding us of the large needs, but also the importance to deliver on the commitment to act. And congratulations on the launching of the platform. So without further ado, I would like now to call on our second speaker, Mr. Dongyu, Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Mr. Dongyu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moderator. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. FAO is pleased to participate in today's event together with many of our long-standing partners. With the World Bank, we have a cooperative program signed in 1964. We have been cooperating with the IFAD since its inception in 1978. FAO started working with the EBRD over 30 years ago. And together, we have built a flagship program for the promotion of sustainable private investment in agri-food systems. FAO also supports national financial institutions to improve the quantity and the quality of their agricultural law portfolios. Ladies and gentlemen, we all agree on the importance of agri-food systems to achieve the 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals, as well as the Paris Agreement. I wish to thank the Italian G20 presidency, the Casa di Possetti and the Prestiti, CDP, and the organizer for having put the transformation of agri-food systems at the top of the agenda of this year's Financial Income Summit. Agri-food systems are crucial to improve the food security, livelihoods, gender and youth empowerment, play the decisive role of 5 Fs. That's what is the real agri-food systems coverage mandate. What is the 5 F? Because a lot of people talk about the food. Of course, agriculture is for food. But not only agriculture, only for food. That's what I keep saying. Since I came here, I know they are already narrowed down the agricultural function. You narrow down agriculture to be equal to the crops. No, agriculture at large, FAO, we cover 4 major areas. Crop production, we call now plant production and protection. Animal health and production. Fishery and aquaculture. And forestry. So that's really the means of agriculture at large. That's why the FAO, we keep saying agri-food systems, not only food. Where does the clothes come from? Before you get the nano chemical products, it's fiber crops. What does the animal eat? It's a feed. Animal feed, dogs, even pet, or other cattle, yeah? Or chicken, what you name it, poultry, in fish. That's what the second F, feed. Food and feed, and then fiber. So there are so many fiber crops which already in Europe we call the green development or natural-based solution. We should push the people to appreciate what the natural fiber produced. From a cocoon, silk, it's animal. Insect, it's animal. And the cotton, hemp, flax, you name it. A lot of unexploited fiber crops, and you can say crop or forestry, should be natural fibers. So I know today the audience, you are not familiar with agriculture. I was a leading scientist. I want to educate a little bit more with overall understanding what is agriculture is. Otherwise, your investment is not to fit the purpose, not to fit the global trend. Fiber, it's also friendly, environment-friendly crops and plants and forestry for the farmers and for the nature, for the environment. And then the 4th F is fuel. Yeah. Fuel. And now you're talking about the gas fuel, fossil, and the petrol oil. What is original from? From forest, from the plants, millions of years ago. But now we have to reproduce our biofuel. Biofuel from gas, biomass, or from the other plants which can produce the fuel in gas, even in the other edible. And actually in the countryside, in the developed world, a lot of families still depend on natural fuel, from the grass, from the timber, from bush. They don't use the electricity or gas to cook or lighting. Yeah? So please look globally, and they have a huge potential to establish science-based, environment-friendly, green economy or sustainable economy. And last but not least, also friendly environment. Agriculture, if you look the holistic way to understand what the real meaning of the agriculture, crop, it's not only for economic reasons, also for environment friendly, and horticulture, fruit, trees, flowers, all the ornamental plants. It's contributed to environment friendly. So the last F, and also forestry, of course, and others. Look the Rome city or Italy or other, all over the world. What is the most attractive places? It's a garden, park. That's why I appreciate the Italian government to support my initiative. We established G20 Green Park Garden in Rome. First time in the history. We just wanted to call all the attention to the green gardening through the innovative, through the science, through the environment-friendly approach. So please remember, agriculture is five Fs. Not only food. Yes, you only talk about food. You are bring all the people, consumers and the producers, the traders, the investors, you are here. Only focus a small, narrow area. What is agriculture meaning? If you ask the farmers, they understood the more holistic, more overall, more comprehensive. All this requires significant and responsible investment. They are low-cost, high-impact interventions that can help hundreds of millions of people get rid of poverty. So that's why if I were the local people here, I will open the horticulture seedlings to introduce each block, each community have a small garden. That will be economically, environmentally, culturally, and they will improve your livelihood, not only farmers and the citizens here. Yeah, there's so big potential. If you look at the case in China, in Japan, in South Korea, we are using horticulture as an industry, not as a farmer's business. Not only for the rural development, also for the city. Because how to upgrade your city to be more environment-friendly, more enjoyable environment for the people who live, they have a big potential to develop. Green, that's real green development. They attract the billions or trillions investment to improve the people able to do less. Because will be 70% of people live in the city by 2050. Yeah? That's our future. So that's why last year I initiated the Green City Initiative on the UN General Assembly. To achieve SDG 2, we needed to attract annual investment about 40 to 50 billion US dollars until 2030. That's very conservative estimate because FAO chief economist here, he is from poor country, so he always underestimated the investment. You are the big money player, so you have to double or triple investment. And that's what we should, because if we only look at the food, of course you need 40, 50 billions. But if you look at the 5 Fs, I would say even China, India alone, they need 1 trillion investment. That's what they did already, or they have done in China in about 10 years for agro-food systems, not only for food system. In addition, 80% of the financial demand of smallholder farmers are currently unmet in developed nations. In Sub-Saharan Africa alone, 3 out of 4 small to medium agri-food enterprises lack sufficient access to financial, with the annual gap between supply and demand estimated at around $65 billion in Sub-Saharan. Public development banks are key part of the solutions. You should be catalyst, you should be facilitator, you should be promoter, you should be first risk management. Because if you don't take that leading role, how the private sector, others, to follow you? You are leading because you are money from public, not from the private. That's the global public goods. First start as financial public goods. Otherwise, you always ask the private to take a risk, which you should do first. That's why I'm so honored to be here today. That's what I did during the past 20 years in different regions. I said, if you don't play your leading role as a public financial goods, you have no future for development. Any place in the world, not only developing nation, Europe, America, you name it. You have a development mandate, long-term perspective, and ability to financial both private and public sectors. They can inject more finances to help fill in the funding gaps, and they can also provide better financing to promote a more sustainable agri-food system worldwide. For this reason, and reach smallholders and small to medium agri-food enterprises in developing countries is a challenge, I know. Not only in the developing nation. In Europe also, it's a challenge. Look at the countryside in Europe. Most developed continent in the world, your countryside is still much behind the city. Yeah? So that's asking your younger generation to want to stay in the countryside or you want to immigrate from countryside to the Rome or to the city. They will tell you the truth. So for this reason, scaling up investment is one of the program priority areas in FAO New Strategy Framework 2022 to 2031. FAO flagship programs such as Hand-in-Hand Initiative and the Food Coalition, together with Italian government and other members, we initiated the Food Coalition first, last year, can help to build our agri-food system back better at the country level, with the technical support of the FAO Investment Center, which support the public investment program project from the project design to the monitoring and assessment of post-investment. In 2022, the FAO Investment Center supported the design of 38 larger programs worth over $6.6 billion in the investment. I challenged with my director of the investment center, 6.6 million, it's a drop of water in ocean for agri-food system transformation and rural development. We need 6.6 trillion. Yeah? I always encourage them to design bigger, do concrete. Because if you don't design bigger, you always talk about a small business. How can you have the big business, big market, and the big potential, which ask you to offer your services? We can help to green your investment by assisting to access financial from the Green Climate Fund and in the design of a climate adaptation project. In 2020, the Green Climate Fund Board approved 7 FAO projects worth over $337 million. FAO also developed an information system and a range of tools for measuring sustainability, including carbon accounting, water efficiency, and biodiversity. One of these instruments, the ABC map, toolkits for the measuring adaptation biodiversity carbon, will be presented in one of the summit thematic sessions. FAO supported enabling policy for the private sector investment in the sustainable agri-food systems and the rural development, as well as private investment through the innovative financing and blended financing. Now, it's everything we should be complementary each other. So that's what the blended financing is the future. Together with EBRD, and we have been developing agri-food sector and the policy study and facilitated public-private dialogue. We have been working with the European Commission to structure its investment into the blended funds, monitored operations, and increase collaboration with the European development financial institutions. In 2020, the FAO Investment Center reviewed more than 70 investment proposals, representing nearly 300 million euros of the potential financial to the private sector. We also needed to improve access to the financial at the local level, working with the local financial institutions and public development banks. For example, together with the European Commission, we are supporting the Uganda Development Bank to grow its agricultural leading portfolio and strengthen its capacity in agri-risk management, while offering innovative products and services to its clients. Dear colleagues, professional knowledge is the first de-risking instrument, and we need to expand and deepen our collaboration for effective knowledge sharing. I know you have money, but sometimes money couldn't solve all the problems if you didn't understand the real risk. That's what the value of FAO and other professional organizations to help you. And also, that's why we have a long-standing cooperation with the World Bank. We know our advantage, our value. We know what is your advantage. Sometimes if you make 1 billion to another billion profit, but sometimes you put your 1 billion just washed away to the Mediterranean Sea. There's so many cases I observed during the past 30 years. Because if you have money, sometimes you become very heated. Yeah? Oh, I have money. Everyone's trying to friend with you, and then there are already a lot of Trumps ahead of you. I know. So that's why you need the professional and the information advisor from professional organization and the consultation. An example of this is our increased cooperation with the CDP. I invited all the public development banks to become FAO partners to collectively and coherently better support our members. FAO is standing firmly committed to work together with the members, partners, and the stakeholders to implement FAO's strategy framework on transformation of more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable agricultural systems for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, a better life for all, leaving no one behind. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Dongyu, for highlighting the richness and the diversity of the agricultural activities, but also the importance of investment, de-risking, risk management, knowledge, and coordination. Our third speaker will be connecting online. So I would like to now to give the floor without further ado to Mrs. Beth Damford, Vice President of Agriculture, Human and Social Development at the African Development Bank. Beth, the floor is yours. Over.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, and all protocol observed. And I really want to thank IFAD and CDP for organizing this very important session. And we gather today not just to talk, but to transform. We must transform Africa's agricultural sector to boost food production and eliminate hunger and food insecurity. And 6 years ago, when the African Development Bank president, Adesina, started his first term at the helm of the African Development Bank Group, he launched a bold strategy for the continent to better, for the better. Really, this was the high fives: to light up and power Africa, to feed Africa, integrate Africa, industrialize Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa. Feed Africa is a key pillar of the high fives. It has 4 specific goals. 1, to contribute to eliminating extreme poverty in Africa by 2025. end hunger and malnutrition in Africa by 2025, make Africa a net food exporter, and move Africa to the top of export-oriented global value chains where it has a comparative advantage. A great example of what the Banque Group is doing as part of Feed Africa is our Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, or TAT, as we like to call it. So we launched this in 2018 with the support of IFAD and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and several other partners. And TAT is currently being implemented across 28 African countries. And in the past 2 years alone, we reached 11 million farmers with 76 proven agricultural technologies across 15 crops. Food production has expanded by over 12 million metric tons, and TAT has saved countries food imports worth $814 million. So central to accelerating Africa's food production will be the African Development Bank's investment in special agricultural processing zones, SAPZs. So these are going to be situated in peri-urban areas, and the zones are benefiting from integrated infrastructure and roads, water, electricity, and ICT, and provide ready markets for millions of farmers located within these zones. So we don't have any time to lose. We know that almost 250 million men, women, and children across the continent go to bed hungry every night. So at least 40% of all the boys and girls in sub-Saharan Africa are stunted. We know that stunted children lead to stunted economies. You can't prosper on an empty stomach. We must end hunger and malnutrition now, and this is only achievable through access to technology, finance, and markets. So first, technology, because we must produce more food with better quality on less land and in a sustainable way, while at the same time ensuring enough incentives and revenues for farmers. So finance, because agricultural projects are not easy to finance, especially by commercial banks. So de-risking mechanisms provided by public development banks are therefore key to unlock local financing. And finally, access to market to ensure the financial sustainability of the agribusiness. The Finance in Common Coalition allows us to forge strong partnerships and drive support to scale up financings for better results. Public development banks can be strategic enablers of investment that combine public and private goods, including a shift to greener, more sustainable, climate-resilient food systems. So the role of public development banks as mobilizers of private commercial capital is now more critical than ever. So we must focus on smallholder farmers and small and medium-sized enterprises as we work to make hunger history. That's why over the next 5 years, the Banque Group will invest $10.4 billion to boost the development of agricultural value chains and food production. And we will invest a further $1.6 billion to strategically support 10 crops to drive food security. So unless we show strong collective resolve and turn ambition into action, Africa is likely to face enormous food shortages. We cannot allow that to happen. Africa needs action now, and it's time to feed Africa once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for reminding us that the time to act is now, and that finance, market, and technology needs to go hand in hand to make a dent in poverty and hunger. So, ladies and gentlemen, with this, our last speaker, we are now closing the first part of our plenary session, and we'll move to the panel, where we will be discussing and collecting the views of multiple stakeholders on how they see the role of public development banks. We decided to have an inclusive discussion, so we lined up a very impressive panel comprising representatives of public development banks, of farmer organizations, of private sector, and some of them will be connecting online, and others are actually with us in the room. Actually, I would like to invite the speaker who's supposed to be physically with us to the podium, please. So, Mrs. Kampeta Sayinzoga, the CEO of the Development Bank of Rwanda. Welcome. Very glad to have a very competent and the female CEO sitting next to me. But actually, my first speaker will be online, and I will actually direct my first question to Mr. G.R. Chintala, the chairman of the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development of India, NABARD, who is connecting with us. Good afternoon, Mr. Chintala. Greetings from Rome. So, Mr. Chintala, you are at the head of one of the leading national development banks. And my first question to you, according to your knowledge and expertise, what are the key conditions for public development banks to contribute more to sustainable food systems? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me to this August gathering. And it's a great seminar. Actually, I was listening to the speakers. And for the pointed questions you asked, actually, I feel that the public development institutions or the banks have to have a kind of a social consciousness along with that urgency of meeting the food requirements. Now, take the case of India. Actually, we have around 1,400 million people to feed, and around 140 million people are the cultivators, and of which around 112 million people are the small and marginal farmers who cultivate less than a hectare, maybe 0.58 hectares. And they produce quite a lot of food. So now the public development banks have to devise products which suit these kind of people, the very small and marginal farmers, who cannot afford to invest a very high amount of money into the systems, but at the same time, they should be in agriculture to produce more. They should make their entire farming profitable. And at the same time, they should protect the environment. So now actually as a public development bank, I feel that now it's the time for all of us to have a kind of a conscious approach to make the farming profitable, ecologically sensitive, and at the same time environmentally sustainable. These are the things which we have to do it. And for that, a new products have to be devised to this one. Existing, actually, that as you are aware, that the NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, is a $90 billion public finance institution, which we are having. And we give quite a lot of finance for not only for production process, but also creating the infrastructure. So I feel that maybe for the global heads also who are listening to me, that it's time for all of us to invest in the critical infrastructure which sustains the production process in the next 50 years or 100 years. And at the same time, this infrastructure should protect the environment in a much big way. As we have observed, actually India right now produces substantial amounts of food grains, close to around 310 million tons of food grains, and we're the second largest producer of sugar, first largest producer of milk, and also cotton, everything we produce. But at the same time, some of these things are happening at the cost of environment. We pump out quite a lot of water, and that is creating an environmental disaster. And at the same time, that the carbon emissions, actually, it is not that agriculture alone, but thing is, as per any of the documents, the agriculture as such contributes close to around 15 to 17% of that carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas emissions. So now the time has come for us to see really how we can make a kind of a green products, which will make a conscious effort on the part of the small and marginal farmers to adapt such kind of a techniques, and at the same time it remains profitable. So this is what I feel that actually this is what we are doing in collaboration with the government of India, that is the very big departments are there, and with the other commercial banks, the private sector banks, wherever actually we interact. We say that actually now we have to be very, very conscious of that environment, because we are producing substantial amounts of everything. But by 2050, in case if the population explosion happens everywhere and the food requirements go up, and that should not deleteriously impact the environment. That is the water table, the greenhouse gas, and also few other things. So now the entire production process have to be environmentally sensitive, and actually they should be sustainable. So that is where actually we are investing quite a lot on watersheds, the tribal development projects where that agroforestry or the horticulture is created for the sustainability. And we are looking into the blue revolution, that is the fisheries, really how it can be made sustainable. And also the animal husbandry aspects, where that maybe the gaseous production from the animals should be less injurious to the environment. So now there also quite a lot of work is happening in the scientific field, but at the same time, as a public development bank, it is our duty to bring all such kind of a scientific technology to the farmer field and make him adapt, and at the same time create a product for him so that he can definitely adopt it. This is what my take on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chintala, for this very interesting response. Actually, I would like now to turn to my panelists in the room, Mrs. Sayinzoga. So you heard the response of an Indian Public Development Bank. And I think it would be extremely interesting that I asked you actually the same question, which is, the conditions for Public Development Bank to contribute to more food systems, looking at it from your experience in Rwanda and elsewhere on the continent.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Thouraya, and to the organizers. I'm told female CEOs of Public Development Bank are rare species, so I had to make sure that I showed that Rwanda always does the hard choices. Well, I think the challenge has been set. It has been set by the VP of the African Development Bank, and the role of the Public Development Bank, or the expectations, have also been set by the DG of FAO in a very elaborate presentation. We are expected to intervene where markets fail, and we all know that when it comes to food systems, there are quite a number of market failures. We're expected to de-risk, and be the first ones to take the risk when the private sector is not ready. We're expected to crowd in private sector funding. We're expected to do more value chain financing and less transaction-based financing. But I think we're here to tell each other the truth. Is this what we do? And I think the challenge has been set, and the reality is we do not always play our role as national development banks to actually meet these expectations. And what you look at when you see the reality is that you find that because agriculture is more risky, the kind of interest rate that we offer to the private sector in the agriculture sector tend to be, yes, risk reflective, but not matching the kind of projects that need to be financed in terms of profitability. When you look at product development, and my colleague from India explained it very well, from NABARD, the kind of product that we offer are often a mismatch to what the farmers and what the private sector really needs. If you look at the de-risking instrument, we tend to limit ourselves to insurance, partial credit guarantee, without really looking at the outcome. What does that mean for the profitability, the end profitability of the project? So there's a long list of things that we tend to miss when it comes to execution, but I think there's a fantastic opportunity now that the dialogue is being reset. And the first thing that I wanted to highlight is that to be able to meet this challenge that we're being challenged with as Public Development Bank, there is an issue of financing. There is an issue of the terms of the financing. Many of the developed countries have had the fiscal space to be able to grow a deficit and to do what the economies needed to do to recover from COVID. In most African countries, our economies did not collapse. Yes, we had a recession, but it did not collapse because of agriculture, not despite of agriculture. In most of our economies, agriculture and manufacturing have actually held the GDP together. And therefore, our ministries of finance, who often finance public development banks, do not have at this point the fiscal space to avail the kind of liquidity that would allow these public development banks that are now ready to take on that challenge to actually take it on. Now, most of the financing that we get from fellow DFIs requires sovereign guarantees, requires some kind of letter of comfort from the ministries of finance, and that further constrains our capability to raise international financing. And I really want to take this opportunity to thank IFAD, because in our case as BAfD, this was the first partner that considered giving us a line of credit, very concessional, without any backing of the Ministry of Finance. And that reflects the risk, because we are a rated bank, so we have a similar risk as the sovereign. And in a way, it does not make sense to ask the sovereign to back up an institution that has a risk that is as reasonable as the sovereign, right? But what we're doing is basically limiting the amount of financing that is now available to restore and reset food systems and meet the challenge. So that would be my first point. My second point, very quickly, is really around the role that we play in terms of introducing technologies and introducing technologies for the private sector in agriculture. And the expectation really, and the role that we need to play, and we've managed to start doing in Rwanda, is to say a development bank should not just be a bank that takes more risk. It should be a bank that takes more risk with more knowledge. And to what extent are we equipping our national development banks to actually have both, yes, cheap financing, but also a knowledge edge to offer to the private sector. Now, finally, very often when we talk about agriculture, and I used to work at the Ministry of Finance, we tend to talk about agriculture in the same bucket as health of education, meaning, sectors that, I'm sorry for the word, but consume money, as opposed to sectors that can generate money. And the only way we're going to move this from the bucket of sectors that consume money to sectors that can generate money is that we need to move the discussion simply about subsidies and public finance required to now thinking about why is the private sector not investing as we want in the private sector, and look at the role of development banks to actually bridge that market failure and have more conversations about the role of the private sector, have more interventions with the private sector through the development banks, and think about scale, because we're not, with the fiscal space that we have, we will not be able to meet the agriculture challenge via public subsidies only.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being candid on the challenges that public development banks face, but also for underscoring the importance of appropriate funding, capacity, and knowledge to make informed, de-risking decisions. I would like now actually to change categories and maybe call on our next speaker, who will be Mrs. Victoria Crawford, Investment Partnership Network Manager. She's representing the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Victoria, the private sector is very often criticized for being profit maximizers. They don't care about the environment, they're just there for the money. My question to you is, could you tell us a little bit more about how the private sector that you are representing, working with, is involved in actions and financing oriented towards sustainable and inclusive food systems, if they're actually doing it? Over to you.
Yes, and thank you for having me here today. The private sector certainly recognized that there is an urgent need to move to more sustainable, equitable, and healthier food systems that can nourish all people. And this isn't just charity. There are also good financial and economic reasons for doing this. On the one hand, this is about mitigating the risks of our existing food systems. So we know that almost half of global GDP is directly dependent on nature, and also that the economic costs of malnutrition has been estimated as being as high as 11% of GDP in some countries. But on the other hand, this is also about opening up economic opportunities. Done right, investing in food systems can unleash $4.5 trillion worth of sustainable business opportunities. So this is part of a wider trend of sustainability becoming increasingly mainstream amongst business. Now, there are a whole range of examples of the private sector taking action on sustainable food systems. This could be banks directing investment towards more sustainable outcomes. It could be companies investing in the communities and natural assets in their supply chains. So, for example, Unilever has launched a Climate and Nature Fund, which will invest in regenerative agriculture and deforestation-free supply chains. Other priority areas for the private sector would be investing in innovation or contributing to equitable livelihoods and living incomes. Despite this, though, we certainly need bigger, bolder, and better action, and fast. You may have seen the recent Food and Agriculture benchmark that has been released by the World Benchmarking Alliance recently. In this, they ranked 350 of the most influential food companies against a range of sustainability measures. And what they found was there certainly are good examples, and examples which show what needs to happen. So we have Unilever, Nestle, and Danone in the top 3 spots. But for the vast majority of food companies, they're far behind where they need to be on issues like climate change and human rights. The good news, though, is that momentum is continuing to build on these topics, and that our understanding of what has to happen is better than it's ever been. Through the recent UN Food Systems Summit, the finance lever of the summit, which was convened by the World Bank along with Systemic and IFPRI, has identified 5 financial imperatives. And these are things like the need to scale fit-for-purpose financial products and to take environmental, social, and health indicators into account in decision-making. But implemented, these 5 financial imperatives could serve to redirect $2 trillion worth of private capital towards more sustainable, equitable, and healthier outcomes in the food system. So I think what the real challenge is now is how we move from dialogue towards action. What we really need to focus on is the instrumentation of these financial imperatives.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for this, for reminding us that it makes business sense, actually, to promote sustainable food systems. I would like now to actually go back to the Public Development Bank's representative, who will be heading west and precisely to Senegal, where I will be inviting Mr. Malick Ndiaye, Directeur Général de la Banque Agricole du Sénégal, to also share with us his views on the key conditions for public development banks to contribute to more sustainable food systems. Mr. Ndiaye, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, the moderator. Bonjour tout le monde, bonjour chers participants. Vous me permettrez donc de m'exprimer en français. La translation apparemment va fonctionner. Je voudrais donc remercier les organisateurs de ce panel qui nous permettra certainement d'échanger sur ce qu'il faut faire comme action clé à l'effet de renforcer effectivement la promotion, en tout cas des chaînes alimentaires mondiales. Et dans ce cas-là, je voudrais simplement m'associer avec les présentateurs qui m'ont précédé au micro pour effectivement indiquer le caractère risqué du financement de l'agriculture et donc qui fait que, évidemment, le secteur n'est pas toujours très attractif pour mobiliser un certain nombre d'investisseurs. Mais je voudrais, pour répondre très rapidement à la question posée, donner un petit peu quelques 5 points qui me paraissent essentiels si nous voulons renforcer effectivement la promotion des chaînes alimentaires à l'échelle mondiale, en particulier pour les pays en voie de développement et les pays africains. Je pense que le premier point clé sur lequel nous devons nous appesantir, c'est d'arriver à obtenir des décideurs publics, des décideurs politiques, un engagement fort. Nous avons besoin d'un engagement fort auprès des décideurs politiques avec la définition de politiques sectorielles pertinentes allant dans le sens d'améliorer l'environnement ou les environnements de la production, l'environnement de la réforme foncière. Il est absolument important que les acteurs accèdent à la terre, les femmes notamment, les jeunes, pour ainsi dire accélérer la révolution agraire, faire en sorte que les productions agricoles soient plus importantes dans nos pays, en particulier en Afrique de l'Ouest. Le deuxième point sur lequel je voudrais insister, c'est nous avons besoin, en tant que banque agricole et banque de développement, de mobiliser encore plus de ressources à long terme, des ressources de long terme, avec des taux concessionnels, des taux compétitifs, pour nous permettre justement de régler la question de l'accessibilité au crédit des couches les plus défavorisées, en particulier les petits producteurs, que ce soit les agriculteurs, que ce soit les éleveurs, que ce soit les pêcheurs. Donc, il est important aussi que nous puissions mobiliser des ressources parce que nous avons besoin d'investir davantage dans le secteur agricole. Et sur ce plan, le financement mixte, blending financing, me paraît effectivement un domaine que nous devons explorer, appuyer davantage. Troisième point, je le dis aussi, je pense que c'est important, nous avons besoin d'investir en masse dans les chaînes de valeurs agricoles et notamment dans la chaîne logistique. Le stockage fait problème, la transformation n'est pas suffisante, les questions d'énergie en agriculture ne sont pas réglées. Il nous faut absolument travailler pour investir et pour investir, il faut des ressources appropriées de long terme. Le quatrième élément sur lequel je voudrais aussi insister, c'est justement de saisir l'opportunité de la finance verte, le fonds vert climat, comme une opportunité que nous pouvons saisir tous à l'effet justement de renforcer la résilience des petits agriculteurs. La Banque agricole a été accréditée au fonds vert climat l'année dernière. Elle s'emploie à introduire des projets, à accélérer l'accès aux ressources du fonds vert avec des partenaires comme le FIDA. Nous sommes sur un projet sous-régional et nous travaillons à pouvoir mobiliser des ressources en mesure d'aider, en tout cas, à renforcer la résilience et la production agricole au niveau du Sénégal. Le cinquième élément que je voudrais aussi mettre comme proposition, c'est le soutien à l'innovation. Ce soutien à l'innovation qu'elle soit technologique ou innovation en termes de bonnes pratiques agricoles, l'utilisation des variétés à haut rendement, les bonnes pratiques aujourd'hui qui sont connues en termes de conduite de culture, devraient aussi nous permettre justement de renforcer les capacités de production de nos acteurs dans le milieu agricole, puisque en réalité, nous n'avons pas encore atteint l'autosuffisance alimentaire. Nous cherchons à produire ce que nous consommons, mais avec beaucoup de difficultés, puisque les chaînes de valeur ne sont pas suffisamment structurées, l'accès au marché n'est pas suffisamment bien organisé et les acteurs perdent une bonne partie de leur production après qu'ils aient fait l'essentiel. Voilà, pour ne pas aller plus loin, les points sur lesquels j'aimerais insister pour partager avec vous les questions, en tout cas les points clés sur lesquels les banques agricoles pourraient avoir une action décisive pour la promotion des chaînes alimentaires au niveau mondial. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ndiaye. It's quite amazing that we had representatives from 3 different regions and who are underscoring the importance of the same things: financing with the appropriate terms, capacity, technology, investment in logistics and infrastructure. So we show that a lot of the challenges are quite common, regardless of which country you are operating on. Of course, we couldn't have a discussion about financing agriculture without having someone speaking also on the behalf of the farm organization, of those who are at the end recipient segment of the financing value chains. And actually, my next speaker, Mrs. Myrna Cunningham, FILAC President and member of the UN Steering Committee of the Food System Summit, will be called upon. Mrs. Cunningham, I would like actually to invite you to share with us some of the key challenges that farmers' organizations face to access financing. You heard earlier about the challenges and also the opportunities that public development banks would offer. So I would also be interested in hearing your views on how you see this public development bank helping addressing some of these challenges. Over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us to these important conversations. I would like to say that the first challenge is that usually we look at farmers' organizations like there's no difference. And I would like to begin by saying that farmers' organizations are diverse. They combine forest and agricultural activities, sometimes fishing, hunting, pastoralist. Some are organized as producers, cooperatives, or associations, while others are based on villages or territories where they live. And in some cases, like for indigenous peoples, ethnic identity, our identity are central for the relation with land, territory, and means of production. So this diversity really defines challenges. And we have seen that there are thousands of families that have stopped producing with all of the problems that they are facing. And a lot are in the rural areas, or the majority. We continue facing threats on lands, territories, forests. Impacts of climate change are exacerbating this situation. And at the same time, we see in different areas of the world where the forests are being destroyed, the ecosystems are facing a lot of stress. So we have also been able to see that the market has been destabilized with COVID-19. Prices have risen. The work of caring for women has increased, and millions of indigenous girls and boys are threatened to being left out of school. So I would say that one of the things that we consider that is important is to build relation, build trust between financial institution and farmers organization. And I would say that one thing that you as a new platform should try to do is to exchange good practices. For example, the experience of indigenous peoples and farmer organizations working with IFAD in the last 10 years, we have gained quite positive experience. We have more than 13 years where we started from no mechanism in place at IFAD that guaranteed the effective participation of indigenous peoples. And now we have been able to jointly define a policy that respects our rights, a policy that calls for free, prior, and informed consent, a policy that recognizes our right to participate. And we have created a steering committee for the continuous dialogue. We have been able to work together on a facility, a grant-making fund that is operated by IFAD, but it's managed by regional indigenous organizations. And we have also been able, with IFAD, to negotiate the involvement of indigenous experts in IFAD's procedures, policies, and operation in member countries. For example, the discussion on the cost of the participation in monitoring, evaluation. These are some of the good practices. So I think that the first thing that we have to do to face the challenge is to really promote that the financial institutions really have and develop policies to work with farmers organizations, with indigenous peoples, that there should be procedures and mechanisms set in place for the continuous dialogue and participation. And at the same time, there should be a discussion on what are the priorities of indigenous peoples and farmers organizations, how they can, what type of investment should be promoted from the financial institutions if we really want to change the way in which you have been working and the way in which you can really combine development, climate change, and the potential growth of farmer organizations. We need the support for strengthening significant forest, farm, and fishing organizations. We need mechanisms to participate in policy dialogues and broker deals with government agencies and private company and investors. We need to develop capacities to change in regulatory, tax, trade, public procurements that are important for us to learn about. And of course, we need the financial institutions to respect our rights to free, prior, and informed consent, and also to support us to make a difference in supporting national governments so they can design response strategies by involving farmers, organizations, and indigenous peoples in policy and decision making. You can, through this platform, you can replicate practical solutions and have access to our organizations, and this can really help us face those immense challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cunningham. Thank you for reminding us that we should avoid the one-size-fits-all approach and also the importance of policy co-creation and the honest broker role that institutions like IFAD could play. Now we are actually quite advanced in this session, and I want us to be really concrete so that it's not just a conversation. We heard this morning Mr. Houngbo launching officially the PDP platform, and I would like now to call on our speakers to collect some few concrete recommendations and thoughts to inform actually the way forward and the design of the platform. So I would like to go back to India and call on Mr. Chintala. Mr. Chintala, you heard all our speakers. We had also the three leaders speaking in the beginning of the session. So after listening to all these interventions, concretely, what are your expectations as a national development bank and your recommendation for this public development bank platform that is now officially launched? Over to you.
Thanks a lot for inviting me again. And we have quite a lot of expectations. First thing, as after hearing all the speakers, that quite a lot of things are happening in various places with the international financial institutions coming to their rescue and all those things. But in the country like India, actually, that we're not looking into the international financing in a much big way right now. But at the same time, we are doing quite a lot of work with their collaborations where the knowledge and other things are being taken to. Like we are working with IFAD, we are working with KFW, we are working with other international organizations. And also maybe we are working with that United Nations organizations and that adaptation fund boards and the GCF, etc., to take forward this entire climate resilient agriculture. So that our expectations of this one, actually the platform we have created should be a kind of an exchange of not only information maybe, but some kind of a material, and also in case if possible maybe some kind of a financial supports also to various countries. I'm not talking specifically about India, but many countries may require, apart from that knowledge, actually they require maybe some kind of a financial assistance, and also the wherewithal with regard to creating a green products for the banking. Actually now this is the basic requirement right now. Take the case of green investment products. Actually, this is what? Actually, the green bonds, which everybody talks about. And there are so many impact investors all over the world. But at the same time, many countries may not be having the wherewithal to go for such kind of raising the funds from the international investors, this green fund. Because this green bonds or maybe this impact investor funds are available at dead cheap rate to most of the countries. Actually, that is the requirement. Why I just want to insist upon, because we are investing quite a lot on the agri infrastructure. We are doing quite a lot on the irrigation infrastructure. We are investing quite a lot on that storage infrastructure. And at the same time, we are creating the collectives of the small and marginal farmers through the farmer producers organizations. Now that every speaker was talking about something, because this farmer producers organization or the collectivization is the need of the world, all over the world. It's not the India alone. As I have seen in many countries that the moment the farmer becomes smaller, marginalized, actually he doesn't have access to many things. Apart from credit, he doesn't have access to the resources, he doesn't have access to the farm mechanization, he doesn't have access to market, also the terms of trade are against him. So actually we need to have this kind of a collective. So actually this particular forum or the platform has to create a kind of an environment where the global exchange of information, how the collectives are working, and really how the value chains are being tuned to this kind of a farmers collectives, and how the big food processors or the big agro companies are becoming, maybe sourcing the material from this kind of a collective, so that the small and marginal farmers actually will get quite a lot of a remuneration out of their activities. So again, I would say there's the terms of trade as well. The second thing is, with regard to the green banking products, because one part is the investment product, the second thing is the banking products also. That is, he has to be given, the farmer has to be given a kind of an affordable finance at a very affordable rate, maybe somewhere around maybe 5%, 4%, or maybe not less than 3 or 4%. Actually, that should be the thing. Now in India, we have a kind of a priority sector kind of a guidelines given by the Reserve Bank of India, where that out of the net credit, the banks are giving actually a certain amount, maybe close to 40% has to be earmarked to the priority sector, and something around 18% to that agriculture alone. So now actually this kind of an earmarking of the bank credit in the nation as a whole will deliver the credit to the farmers, actually, which I heard from many countries. Actually, the farmers probably may not be getting the credit from the public financial institutions in the adequate quantity. So actually now this kind of a thing can come. So this a particular platform which you have created actually has to give such kind of an information to all other countries where their fiscal policies and also their banking regulations and also the other policies have to be dovetailed into delivering credit to the farmers to the most affordable. Then the third one is with regard to that natural resource management. This is the most important thing which probably many of the people are aware, but at the same time in this total discourse, barring few, actually many are not speaking about, but otherwise everyone is right now facing a very big challenge of these cataclysmic things that are happening with regard to the finance. So now that climate proofing, environmental sustainability, saving the natural resources, these are the things which we have to look at. For that, actually, the farmers have to be incentivized in some form, either by way of knowledge, by way of technology, by way of collectivization, by way of giving affordable credit, and maybe making the terms of trade for him very affordable, maybe in positive to him, so that he can get quite a lot of a benefit out of it. So this platform, I expect quite a lot, because the public sector financial institutions, or maybe PBS, whatever you call, actually, they have a very critical role to play. As every speaker after speaker was telling, that agriculture is not a very favorite subject of many of the private sector banks or institutions. But thing is, that in India, even the private sector banks were given the targets, actually they have to do it. Otherwise, their money has to be routed for some other kind of a funding where we are creating infrastructure. I think this kind of information exchange is required at the global level, particularly the challenges which the globe is going to face in the next maybe 30, 40 years with regard to the entire climate change, the requirements of the food, and also the malnutrition, so many other things which we are talking about. The time has come for us to have a very big exchange idea exchange. I can say that idea exchange through this platform. And there should be very frequent interactions, and you can collect the information from various countries as to really how they have pepped up their entire agricultural operations, the environmental sustainability, and the 5 Fs, which we are directing. These are the requirements as to really how, by meeting those 5 Fs, we are protecting everything and also keeping the farmer in his place, so that the capacity building of the farmer, capacity building of the banker, and creating the products for the investment, creating the products for that credit, and at the same time creating affordable markets, actually, which will give the remuneration to the farmer. These are all the requirements, and I expect this platform to do such kind of a global exchange of ideas, and I wish that it is going to happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very insightful recommendations. I would like now to turn to my guest in the room, Mrs. Sayinzoga. If you have to include your items on the wish list for the recommendation and suggestion for the platform, what would it be?
So thank you. I'm looking for somebody who can save me school fees, basically making sure that we don't have to make the same mistakes that other PDBs have done in the past. We're all at different stages of development, so I won't repeat what my colleague from India has mentioned, but knowing what has worked, but also what has not worked. We always talk about what has worked, and we're very shy of what has not worked. And I think if this is something that we can do as a platform, then we'll have a constructive conversation. I see that our time is out, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Yes, no, unfortunately we have, I've been a very poor moderator in terms of time management. Without further ado, I would like now actually to to close this part of the panel and thank very much our speakers who really made the time and the effort, and hand over maybe to our next speaker, Mr. Leonard Mizzi from the European Union. He's the head of unit for rural development, food security, nutrition. Leonard, you heard the richness of the interventions this morning, so I would be calling on you to help us summarize some of your takeaway from the discussion that we've been having. Over to you.
Good afternoon from Brussels, and thanks to Thouraya. A very rich discussion and debate, and I would like maybe in a few minutes to synthesize a bit what I heard in the past hour or so. First of all, I think this is an opportune moment. We come from the Matera Declaration, where there was clearly a reference to what we are doing here in the platform and with the public development banks. We had the UN Food System Summit. We go to Glasgow. We will have the N4G in Tokyo. If we don't grasp the opportunities now, I don't know when we can grasp them. I heard lots of positioning about 2025 to 2030. I think as a colleague from Rwanda said, and also Myrna said, we need to start showing impact on the ground. Rather than speak only about billions and billions, fine, we know the gaps, but we need to start saying what is working and why things are not working, what needs to be done. There is clearly a de-risking gap that needs to be addressed. The appetite out there is limited. And I haven't heard much about the issue of COVID, post-COVID, and typology of recovery in a context where the world in 2021, 2022 is going to be a much different world than pre-COVID. So that is something that I think the public development banks need to discuss across the value chain with people like Myrna, because a multi-stakeholder approach is going to be critical. What we are trying to do with the FAO Investment Center and other partners around cocoa value chains is precisely this. This is hard work if you want to have systems thinking. Systems being all the value chain operators from cocoa bean to chocolate bar across the value chain, and also landscape thinking, meaning food systems, biodiversity, forestry, climate change. This is not easy thinking also from a finance point of view, because first of all, how to de-risk this landscape approach, and also how to show that this is of benefit to the farming community as well, because it's not easy just to speak about ecosystem services or nature-based solutions. It's also important that we show that this benefits also farming communities. And I think this is also the role of the platform as well. What could be the gaps of financing in terms of carbon sequestration, carbon trading, carbon finance? I think this is issues around green bonds, innovative finance. So I think this is also a role of the platform to communicate, to see typologies across the globe, including on aquatic and coastal communities. Because this is a gap, because yes, we need to speak about innovation, about finance, about trade. But I think the stories, the impact on the ground, also having a gender lens and also a youth lens. The future of food systems is going to be critical on how we attract young people into the food systems thinking. If we don't have that generational renewal, we will not have food systems which will be functional in 2030 and beyond. So I think this is also a key issue. And last but not least, I think clearly there is competition across the banking community. This is normal. This is part of the game. But I think there needs to be more collaboration on the ground, Thouraya, in regional specifics, cooperation in terms of what can work, what's not working, and how to share experience and best practices. If the platform can manage to have a compendium, to have a profiling, and maybe we track this on a systemic basis. As part also of the delivery of the UN Food System Summit, I think that could be a critical role of the platform, and we as European Union, with our portfolio that we have been construing together with you as IFAD under the ABC Fund, with some of the agencies, we have the Huruma Fund, with ACID, and also we have Agrify with the EDFIs. I think we can start showcasing what's impactful, how the missing middle is being addressed, and how also to address a gender lens, a human rights-based approach, and also attract youth to food systems in the coming generation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Leonard, for this very important words. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the final session of our plenary. I would like to call our next speaker to start delivering the closing remarks, Mrs. Antonella Baldino, Chief International Development Finance Officer at La Cassa Depositi e Prestiti. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to address you in this plenary session on agriculture on the first day of the Financing Commons Summit, which CDP is proud to host here in Rome. I would like to thank IFAD for organizing and leading this session, and our distinguished guests and speakers for their contribution. So we opened this summit at the very heart of one of the major challenges faced by financial institutions in this historic model: the global responsibility to ensure affordable access to sufficient nutrition and safe food for a growing world population, while at the same time reducing the environmental impact of agriculture and addressing the threat posed by climate change. So major challenges and structural trends accelerated by the pandemic at a pace we could never have imagined. And as the pandemic evolved, we need to shift the focus from preserving the economy to transforming it. A transformation that encompasses the entire food, agriculture, and agribusiness value chain, a transformation which has a significant multiple implications, unprecedented risk, and far-reaching opportunities. So high potential, but also the need for significant financial support, currently estimated at around $350 billion per year for the next decade to achieve the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement targets. So this 2 days summit is the opportunity for us to discuss how PDBs and their stakeholders can best contribute to the major challenges we are facing, fine-tuning the right size and the right pace at which we need to proceed. It will be an opportunity to frame key issues, define common initiatives, and set shared priorities, considering different perspectives, from innovation and digitalization to climate change, biodiversity, food security, and innovative financial schemes. So themes and challenges that call for a decisive collective effort from public development banks, and that are also the fil rouge connecting this afternoon different working sessions. The PDBs platform for green and inclusive food system presented today by IFAD addresses this need, aimed at strengthening the capacity of PDB to reorient, optimize, and scale up our financing, area where international cooperation can effectively deliver. We are committed to this approach, and this is one of the key priorities in our agenda at CDP as the Italian National Promotion Institution and the FI. And it is no coincidence that food and agriculture are both excellencies in which we have cutting-edge entrepreneurial and financial expertise. Italy has consistently and increasingly contributed to focusing attention on food security in the international debate from the launch of the Food Coalition under the aegis of FAO. Food has been a central theme in the agenda of the Italian presidency of the G20, as reflected in the Matera Declaration, and further confirmed last July when Italy hosted the UN Food System Pre-Summit. Today, the Financing Commons Summit provides a forum for PDB where we can contribute to this international debate, designing concrete pathways towards the development of a sustainable and inclusive agri-food value chain. So we look forward to the following session in order to continue this fruitful dialogue and to take action on key priorities to support food system transformation at scale across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Baldino. Our next speaker will be actually online. I will be calling on Mrs. Mari Pangastu, Managing Director for Partnership and Development Policy at the World Bank. Mrs. Mari, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this plenary. I think the topic that we are discussing today, how to harness financing to transform food systems, has been at the heart of what the World Bank has been doing. And we have been engaging with the UN Food System Summit over the past year. Our work with IFPRI, the Food and Land Use Coalition, and other experts culminated in a paper on food finance architecture recently published in September. So let me just share with you some of the key takeaways from that work today. First, we must acknowledge that current financing models do not work. Financial transfers to food producers, market price support, or other forms of public spending have certainly helped to increase production and feed a growing population. But as other speakers have already pointed out, the way agriculture is practiced, the very structure of the food system, is just much too costly. Current systems result in about $12 trillion in hidden costs, ranging from global warming, waste and environmental degradation to poverty, inequity, and malnutrition. I also want to stress the urgency of this agenda. Many of you have also emphasized this. The window of time for climate action is closing fast. The IPCC tells us we are heading towards a dangerously hot 2.7 degrees world if countries fulfill their current commitment. That won't do. We need to think big and boldly to keep the world below 1.5 degrees centigrade of global warming. At the World Bank, we believe food and land use systems, which contribute about 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions, have a key role to play. That's why the bank's new climate change action plan points to agriculture, food, water, and land as one of the 5 key systems where a green transition is urgent and necessary. But just to emphasize, this is not obviously just about climate goals. It is how to integrate climate with development. The focus on those systems is not just the climate imperative, but how can we do it as well to address food security, improve livelihoods of farmers and lives by providing better quality, affordable and nutritious food. Finally, this is the big question. I heard everybody saying, enough talk, what can be done? Many of the technical solutions are well known, but the incentives are by and large absent. In our work with IFPRI and FOLU, we identified 5 financial imperatives to make food systems the cornerstone of a healthier planet with nutritious food for everyone. These shifts include, first of all, repurposing public policies and support to achieve better outcomes. According to our analysis of public support in 79 countries, governments spend about $517 billion supporting food production. This money could be much better targeted and more effectively used. I think sort of the imperative, given fiscal constraints that many countries are having, it is really a good time to relook at the spending on food production and see how we can repurpose it in a way which is more effective and at the same time achieve climate goals at the same time. So second, making environmental and social disclosures mandatory along the entire food value chains. We heard a lot about discussions about food value chains today, so that consumers can choose better products and sustainable products are better rewarded. The key here is, I heard also a few mention about this, how to have capacity building for countries to be able to set up the infrastructure to do so. And obviously, how can we make sure that farmers and SMEs can also participate in this sustainable supply chain? Third, providing living incomes and wages so people can afford healthy and sustainable diets. One of the learnings from the COVID social protection programs that we've been rolling out for the last year is that oftentimes it's better sometimes to provide food rather than cash, and to make sure that women and children can access food, because that was one of the findings, that people are eating less because they have less income, and women were eating less. So we need to also, as one of you mentioned, have a gender lens. Fourth, strengthening the global governance of food and trade to reduce price volatility. Here, I think the issue of trade restrictions that have led to food price volatilities in the past really also needs to be managed. And this is one of the issues that the WTO is looking at. Finally, rethinking the division of roles between the public and the private actors. Since investments in green projects are viewed as more risky than conventional agriculture, the public sector can play the role of guarantor, de-risking private investment that generate environmental, health, and social benefits without saddling farmers and SMEs with unsustainable levels of debt. All told, changing the food finance architecture could redirect some $2 trillion in private capital towards healthier outcomes and unlock about 4.5 trillion in new business opportunities every year. Working across public and private finance, we have today a historic opportunity to transform food systems at scale. Let's all do it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pangastu, for reminding us the 5 imperatives coming from the finance leader of the Food Systems Summit. Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Puri, Associate Vice President, Strategy and Knowledge Department from the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Joe, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Thouraya. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, we seem to have some problems connecting. Maybe we can go to our next speaker and then come back. So our next speaker is Mr. Bertrand Valkener, Deputy Chief Executive Officer from Agence Française de Développement.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be there to represent AFD. And I would like to begin first with a very, very warm thank you to CDP and to IFAD for convening this event. I will not switch to French, and I'll come back to English at the end to summarize my conclusions if need be, but Mr. Ndiaye, and I want to thank him for that, set the tone, so I cannot speak English on this panel. Merci pour les interventions qui ont été très intéressantes. Je voudrais souligner 4 points qui me paraissent particulièrement importants. Le premier, comme vous l'avez, cher Thouraya, résumé, c'est la convergence de vues qui me semble apparaître entre les propos qui ont été tenus par M. Chintala, par M. Ndiaye et par Mme Sayinzoga sur la façon dont les banques publiques de développement envisagent leurs interventions dans le secteur agricole. C'est un point qui me paraît très important puisque nous travaillons, nous vivons et nous intervenons dans des pays de cultures différentes, de géographies différentes et de climats différents. Et il y a dans l'univers des banques publiques de développement une convergence de vues, d'outils, de moyens, de visions sur ce que nous voulons mettre en œuvre. Et ça me paraît être un des points très importants qui ressort des conclusions et des travaux de la matinée que nous venons d'avoir. Premier point. Le deuxième point, et c'est Madame Sayinzoga qu'il a mentionné tout à l'heure, un peu plus tôt dans la matinée, c'est le rôle spécifique que les banques publiques de développement, parce qu'elles ne sont pas des États, parce qu'elles sont présentes sur le terrain, peuvent avoir. En n'étant pas des États, elles ont la capacité à s'endetter, sans endetter les États en même temps qu'elles-mêmes, et la capacité du coup à intervenir en soutien de la chaîne de valeur de production agricole, des agriculteurs, et dans le cadre d'un écosystème financier qui permet de mobiliser des financements en direction du développement du secteur agricole, mais sans peser directement sur les ressources des pays. C'est un point qui me paraît très important. Le troisième point que je retiens également, et c'est Madame Cunningham qui l'a mentionné, c'est la façon dont, dans les projets agricoles, les banques de développement, les acteurs de développement, les acteurs de l'investissement peuvent mobiliser les agriculteurs, les communautés locales dans leur participation à la définition des politiques publiques et des stratégies de développement des territoires auxquels ils appartiennent. Et c'est ça qui me paraît absolument clé dans les discussions qui ont lieu ce matin, c'est cette capacité des banques de développement à faire le lien entre et à avoir une vision assez universelle et partagée des méthodes et des visions et des stratégies à mettre en œuvre sur le terrain, et en même temps cet ADN unique de la banque que dirige M. Chintala, qui connaît les enjeux propres à l'Inde, la banque que dirige M. Ndiaye, qui connaît les enjeux propres au Sénégal et qui est capable de connecter des outils financiers pointus de haut niveau avec les enjeux de terrain que sont ceux des agriculteurs, des cultures, de l'environnement local dans lequel ils travaillent. C'est un enjeu absolument clé sur notre capacité, en tant que banque publique de développement, à mobiliser, à investir dans le secteur agricole. Et là encore, je voudrais relever le point qui a été mentionné par Madame Sayinzoga. Effectivement, en ces temps de pandémie, l'agriculture n'a pas été un facteur qui a conduit à l'agriculture a été un facteur qui a conduit à la stabilisation et à la capacité de rebond des États en ce qu'elle permettait d'apporter sécurité alimentaire, stabilité des territoires et développement d'une chaîne de valeur, d'une chaîne de production avec tous les emplois qui sont à la clé. Donc à ce titre-là, le rôle des banques publiques de développement me paraît absolument crucial parce qu'elles sont en capacité, donc on l'a déjà mentionné, mais d'aligner leur mandat et d'avoir une vision commune à l'échelle internationale de ce qu'est le développement agricole, de ce qu'est la participation du secteur agricole à la lutte contre le changement climatique, et comme l'a rappelé très justement Madame Pangastu, de ce qu'est aussi l'urgence à pouvoir agir ensemble dans la même direction pour pouvoir apporter une réponse aux besoins alimentaires, apporter une réponse aux besoins des chaînes de valeur agricoles et apporter une réponse aux besoins absolument cruciaux que sont la lutte contre le changement climatique, comme j'ai eu l'occasion de l'indiquer. Donc à ce titre-là, je trouve que la proposition de l'IFAD de créer cette plateforme, cela a été annoncé un peu plus tôt, est absolument stratégique puisqu'elle va nous conduire, acteurs publics, acteurs représentant les agriculteurs, représentant les communautés indigènes et acteurs représentant le secteur privé. Victoria Crawford a beaucoup insisté sur les enjeux associés à la mobilisation du secteur privé. Cette plateforme, elle a justement cet objectif en mobilisant des ressources concessionnelles, en mobilisant des ressources en matière de formation, en travaillant également sur les standards en matière d'impact. Et les banques publiques de développement ont dans leur ADN de travailler sur des standards qui soient les plus communs possibles, qu'il s'agisse de manière très concrète et opérationnelle, du contenu en matière organique dans les sols, de la diversité des semences, des céréales qui sont utilisées par les agriculteurs pour travailler, de la reconstitution du potentiel hydrique organique des sols. C'est un des enjeux d'ailleurs, M. Ndiaye travaille dessus avec son institution, mais qui est au cœur du projet de la Grande Muraille Verte et de la façon dont les banques agricoles de développement peuvent accompagner ce projet extrêmement ambitieux à l'échelle africaine. Voilà, ces banques publiques de développement, via la plateforme, auront la capacité à travailler sur ces différents enjeux. Et je conclurai en vous encourageant à participer à l'une des sessions qui aura lieu cet après-midi, qui est pilotée par la FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, et qui va justement mettre l'accent sur la restitution des travaux permettant de définir des standards communs, permettant aux différentes institutions de travailler sur l'impact qu'elles ont sur le terrain et la mobilisation des agriculteurs. Voilà, so I would like to conclude in saying that public development banks have a key role to play because they can align their mandates. As Mr. Midzi mentioned from the European Commission, they are also able to incorporate in their activities gender issues and a gender view on how to mobilize women and how to have an impact which will lead to the development of agricultural activities bared by women. I also want to stress the key role they play in the designing of key indicators of their activities and the ability they will have to implement those indicators on a worldwide scale, thanks to the platform that IFAD is launching, and thanks to the collective work that public development institutions focusing on agriculture are currently mobilizing on. And finally, the last and important role of public development institutions is the legitimacy of the public intervention together with the private sector, and this is what is key here. They are able to mobilize private investors, and they are also able to mobilize private investors because they de-risk activities, because they have blending instruments that are capable of de-risking their operations, but also because by defining indicators that value organic content of soil, that value biodiversity, and that value the fight against climate change, they represent an interest and a legitimacy for private investors to work together with them. So that's this is how I will conclude my points. Over to you, Thouraya, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Bertrand, for this very comprehensive summary. I've been informed that Dr. Puri is online, so I would like to give you the floor to deliver the closing remarks. So, Joe, over to you.
Thank you very much, Thouraya, and apologies. I'm sitting in Maputo currently, and so the bandwidth here is going in and out. But I'm hoping that I have you now. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard today that public development banks can play a very important role in the financing of transforming global food production systems. With a very specific trait as private institutional actor that is in the hand of the government, they can have a very impactful role in the overall process of this transformation. But it is also true that they are challenged by this mixed nature. And this characteristic of both having the private institutional attribute, but also having a governmental attribute has often been considered a threat, but we believe is now becoming a winning trait. With their current annual investment of nearly $1.4 trillion and their public development mandate, PDBs are ideally placed to direct the world's financial systems to address the inequities and inefficiencies of our food systems today, far more effectively and far more sustainably than we've seen till now. Their role, ladies and gentlemen, is particularly crucial in increasing resources for smallholder farmer producers who grow a third of the world's food. The Matera Declaration, as many other speakers have mentioned already, highlight the special and specific role that PDBs can play in overcoming market failures and missing markets and making target sectors far more attractive also to private funds. But at the same time, I think it's also important that we acknowledge that PDBs have been operating for decades and with mixed results, and would need to reform themselves to be able to play the leading role that we anticipate for them. In the lead up to the Finance in Common Summit, the G20 Leaders Summit, and COP26, we're encouraging the development of this platform and asking and encouraging everyone who has a similar mandate to join. The platform aims to contribute to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and the objectives of the Paris Agreement. To this end, the PDB's platform focuses on inclusive and green food system financing and is open to members who share this vision and ambition regarding not just food system transformation, but also climate change issues. And it builds on a group of like-minded partner PDBs, national, regional, and international, that have strong national presence. PDBs operating in agriculture and food systems, ladies and gentlemen, as you've all noted, are diverse in terms of capital base, mandate, and instruments. Therefore, the services proposed by the platform for its members will also have to be customized and to be tailor-made. So some of the PDB members will need to act as sources of expertise for others, depending on issues. And that's why we actually think that this platform can be an extremely important public good. We hope that it will become a knowledge hub, which not only informs what works for whom, why, how much, and under what circumstances, as many of you noted, but that effectively and systematically reaches member banks with its information services, while at the same time informing the overall evolution of the PDB system itself. The speakers in the panel, ladies and gentlemen, highlighted the great benefits that we can get in improving synergies between stakeholders that are engaged in inclusive and sustainable food systems. In this cause, we're encouraging PDBs to join the platform, and we emphasize the need for stronger coordination also between donors, as well as with other stakeholders, such as philanthropists and civil society members, so that we can share information about their activities and results achieved in their overall and ongoing portfolios. IFAD is committed to using its convening power and expertise to ensure steady progress in the design of the platform, as well as its operationalization, while inviting other partners to contribute. Lastly, and I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't say this, we are committed to systematically measuring the results of such an initiative, which would then be discussed with stakeholders during the next summit in 2022. Thanks very much, Thouraya, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Jo. So, ladies and gentlemen, with Jo's words, we have now officially reached the end of our plenary session. I'm also mindful that I'm probably the last barrier between you and lunch, so I'll try to be very brief. I think Bertrand earlier made a very comprehensive summary. I would like to start by thanking the organizers, but also our speakers for taking the time to share with us their insight, their vision, and their recommendation for the platform. We heard it loud and clear this morning that the time to act is now, that we will be much stronger acting together, learning from best practice, but also from our mistakes. I think we compiled a long list of things that this platform will have to deliver, coming from finance to policy to knowledge to peer-to-peer to support to technology, to revisiting the public subsidies. As Jo said, and I will finish with that, we are committed to act. IFAD will be using its convening power, working with the like-minded partners with whom we started this journey a year ago, with our key partners, Agence Française de Développement, CDP, the Finance and Commons Secretariat, and all the national, regional, and multinational development banks that we heard today and are part also of this working group. We give you a rendezvous next year to report on the progress and the results that have been achieved. And I would like to conclude by thanking you for your participation and wishing you bon appétit. Thank you.